हेलो ह्यूमंस, वेलकम बैक टू योर थॉट्स आर वैलिड एंड आई होप यू ऑल आर डूइंग ग्रेट। सो आज हम स्ट्रेस खत्म कर देंगे। आज हम स्ट्रेस की दो और थ्योरीज पढ़ेंगे एंड विद दैट द कंसेप्ट ऑफ स्ट्रेस विल बी completed. So this is the part 10th of health psychology crash course. So let's see आज हम कौन से दो मॉडल पढ़ने वाले हैं। आज हम कैनन और लेजारस का ने जो थ्योरी दी थी स्ट्रेस को लेके वो हम पढ़ेंगे। सो लेट्स स्टार्ट। तो पहले हम पढ़ते हैं ट्रांजैक्शनल मॉडल ऑफ स्ट्रेस जो कि लेजारस ने दिया था 1999 में। ये मॉडल लेजारस और फोकमैन दोनों ने मिलके दिया था। ओके, सो फ्यूजन फोकमैन ने बेसिकली इसको एक्चुअली डिस्कवर किया था 1960s में, बट इसको बाद में दोनों ने मिलकर डिफाइन किया था, लेजारस और फोकमैन ने 1977 के आसपास। सो लेट्स सी कि इस मॉडल में है क्या। तो लेट्स लुक एट द फर्स्ट स्टेटमेंट। Transactions that lead to the condition of stress generally involves a process of cognitive appraisal, which takes two forms. Primary appraisal focuses on whether a demand threatens the person's well-being, and secondary appraisal assesses the resources available for meeting the demand. Okay, so basically, what they said is that the conditions that lead to the stress, that lead to this condition of stress, so for that some transactions happens which actually lead to that, and this basically involves a process of cognitive appraisal, and this process of cognitive appraisal has two forms. First is of primary appraisal, which focuses on, like if there is a threat in the environment, does it threaten the person's well-being or not? And secondary appraisal basically assesses what are the resources available to meet the demand. Okay, so after looking at these two things, whatever transactions happen at cognitive level in our brain, so that will lead to stress. Okay, so first thing is like if the threatens you or not, and if you have enough resources to deal with that situation or not. Then primary appraisal produces one of three judgments. Okay, so three judgments can be there when it comes to primary appraisal. The first can be that the demand is irrelevant, like it is like mm, nothing to worry about. Then it is good, like it causes you stress, or it is bad, or we can say that it is stressful. A stressful appraisal receives further assessment for the amount of harm or loss, the threat of future harm, and the degree of challenge the demand presents. Okay, so now even in the primary appraisal, when it satisfied the third condition, that is the event is a stressful, now we need to see that if it how much harm it is causing, or how much the threat is, and what is like the degree of challenge one is facing. Then, when primary and secondary appraisals indicate that our resources are sufficient to meet the demands, we may experience little stress. But when we appraise a discrepancy where the demand seems greater than our resources, we may feel a substantial amount of stress. Okay, so now it's like when we have considered both the things like the threat and the resources available, so if the resources are sufficient to meet the challenge, then it is like very little stress. But if like the demands are too much and you don't have enough resources to cope with that situation, then there will be a lot of stress. Okay, so this is like the transactional model of stress given by Lazarus and Folkman. This is like a brief about this model. Let's move on. So just look at this diagram. Let me use annotation. Okay, so in the environment there are stressors. Okay, stressors are basically those stimulus which causes stress. So then there will be many, like there can be many stressors, but then it depends from person to person what is a stressor for them. Might not be stressor for the other person. So like here the perception filter will be there, like it depends from person to person. Then we will select some stressors which actually is causing stress to them. Then what will happen? uh, Primary appraisal. Okay, so basically we need to interpret these stressors, if those are positive, dangerous, or irrelevant. Okay, so we will list out positive and irrelevant. Positive will lead to positive things. Irrelevant, it's like not even valid to consider. Then if it is dangerous, like the stressor is interpreted as being dangerous, so it can be a challenge, it can be a threat, it can be like you know you have to perceive how much harm or loss it is causing. Then there will come the stage of secondary appraisal. Now we will see what resources one has to deal with that situation. If the resources are insufficient, then it will lead to stress. If the resources are sufficient, then it is fine. But if there are insufficient resources, then it will lead to stress. And if there is a stress, we need to cope. We need to cope to overcome stress. So coping can be of two types. It can be problem focused, like change situation itself, or emotion focused, like change relation to the situation. Okay, like how you are reacting to the situation, you might change that, or you might even change the situation itself. Then there will be reappraisal. Now, when you are dealing with the stress, coping with the stress, now you need to reappraise. You need to, you know, change your speed of dealing with the situation and also learn from that situation. So I hope this diagram is also clear to you. If it is clear, we will move on. Uh, so let's move on. Okay, so Lazarus states that stress is experienced when a person perceives that the demands exceed the personal and social resources the individual is able to mobilize. This is called the transactional model of stress and coping. Okay, so basically, the Lazarus is saying that whenever a situation comes, first it is need to undergo primary appraisal, in which a person will identify if it is positive, irrelevant, or dangerous. If it is dangerous, how dangerous it is, how much threat it is causing, how much it is challenging you, and how much harm or loss is it causing. Okay, and then the person will look out the resources he or she has to deal with that situation. If the resources are enough, then it is fine. But if the resources are not enough, which means that the demands exceed the personal and social resources one has, then stress will, like there will be a lot of stress. And this is like the transactional model of stress and coping. Neither the environmental event nor the person's response define stress. Rather, the individual's perception of the psychological situation is the critical factor. Okay, so it is not about the environment you are in, or about you defining the stress. It is more about how you perceive the situation you are in. Okay, that defines stress for you. According to Lazarus, the effect that stress has on a person is based more on that person's feeling of threat, vulnerability, and ability to cope than on the stressful event itself. Okay, so it's like Lazarus was saying that the effect that stress has on one person, it is very subjective. It depends from person to person. For example, when COVID happened, many people were too afraid. Like uh, they were under too much of a stress. On the other hand, some were not worrying that much. Although the situation was same for everyone, but everyone has a different way of perceiving that situation. So it depends on the person. And Lazarus defines psychological stress as a particular relationship between the person and environment, and that is appraised by the person as taxing or exceeding his or her resources and endangering his or her well-being. Then there is primary appraisal. So when we decide if a situation is threatening or positive, relevant or irrelevant to our situation, there are three things needed to be evaluated. Is the threat significant to that person? Is it a positive encounter? Is it threatening, harmful, or challenging? If an individual decides that the situation is threatening, the following may occur: injury, illness, angry, disgust, disappointment, worry, anxiety, anticipation. Then secondary appraisal, when we assess that resources are available to us to help combat or cope with the stressor. An individual may choose to use internal options, which are willpower, inner strength, or external options, which are like friends, peers, professional help. Then let's move on. Problem-based coping. It is used when we feel we have control over the situation, thus can manage the source of the problem. There are 4 steps to manage this stress. First, we need to define the problem. Then we need to generate alternative solutions. Then we need to learn new skills to deal with the stressors. Then we need to reappraise and find new standards of behavior. Okay, so first we need to define the problem. So here we learned, let's look at the coping part, okay? Look at this part. We understood when there is a stress, we need to cope. So coping can be of two types. It can be either problem focused, in which the focus will be on changing the situation itself, and the other will be emotion focused, in which change relation to the situation will happen. Okay, so I hope it is clear to you. Now let's look at problem focused coping first. Okay, so let us look. So first we need to define the problem. Suppose the problem is depression. Okay, now generate alternative solutions. What different thing you can do to get out of that situation? Maybe the depression is because of loneliness, so you can try making new friends. You can start, you can join a club. You can go at a place where there are more where there are people uh, who are known to you. Then you can learn new skills to deal with the stressors. If it is because of loneliness, you can find other ways to cope with that loneliness, like you can join clubs, or maybe you can just watch videos in the free time instead of feeling bad. Or then what, in the fourth step, what you need to do now, when you are using different strategies to change the situation itself, you need to reappraise and find new standards of behavior. Okay, now let's see emotion based coping. It is used when an individual feels as if they cannot manage the source of the problem. Okay, so here the focus is not on the source of the problem, but how the person is reacting to it. It involves gaining strategies for regulating stress. For example, it might be avoiding. I'm not going to school because I feel alone there. It can be distancing, like distancing yourself from the stress, just saying that it doesn't happen or I'm used to it. Or maybe acceptance. If I failed that exam, but I have 4 other subjects that you just accepted, okay, this happened, but now you have to look forward. Then you can seek medical support. Then you can turn to harmful behaviors like smoking or alcohol. So I hope it's clear to you now till here. Let's move on. So let's just see what are the strengths and weaknesses of Lazarus model. So let us first look at the strengths. It considers cognitive approaches as opposed to gas cell. So basically, in the gas model, the focus was in biological perspective, but here the focus was given to cognitive approach. It's a dynamic model. Then it caters for individual differences, that every person is different, how they perceive a situation is different. And the last one is that it identifies alternative methods for dealing with the stress. We understood about problem-based coping and emotion-based coping, so it talks about that. Then what is the weakness? That there is lack of evidence. Okay, like it is not practically possible to apply this situation in all the situations. So that is there is lack of evidence. Then it is difficult to label factors that determine stress. Okay, then there is overlap of primary and secondary appraisals. Okay, like primary and secondary appraisal might overlap. And also it is very difficult to determine, like sometimes it gets too difficult which thing is causing you stress, what is like a stressor for you at that moment, especially when you are suffering from depression. It becomes very difficult for you to identify what actually is stressing you out. So I hope this model is clear. Now we need to learn Cannon's theory of stress, or we can say fight or flight theory. So the earliest contribution to stress research was Walter Cannon's description of the fight or flight response. Cannon proposed that when an organism perceives a threat, the body is rapidly aroused and motivated via the sympathetic nervous system and the endocrine system. So Cannon said that whenever a person perceives that the situation is threatening or challenging, so at that time the body gets aroused and it also gets motivated because of sympathetic nervous system and also the endocrine system. This concerted physiological response mobilizes the organism to attack the threat or to flee, hence it is called the fight or flight response. So because of this physiological response, because of sympathetic nervous system and endocrine system, uh, the organism, the person is ready to either fight with the situation or fly, or just fly away from that situation, flee. So that is why this is called fight or flight response. At one time, fight or flight literally referred to fighting or fleeing in response to stressful events such as attack by a predator. Okay. So it's like, a tiger is coming towards you to eat you. So there are two options: either just run away from the situation, from the area, or just, kill the tiger. So either kill the tiger. So this is fight or flight. In that you will be running away from that situation. So earlier it is like literally fighting or fleeing, but like just like I gave you the example. But now more commonly, fight refers to aggressive responses to stress, such as getting angry or taking action. Now it's like, we can say fighting like when someone, does something wrong to you, like, someone is just abusing you for no reason. So the anger you are showing to that will also come under fight. uh, while flight is like, you are socially withdrawing or withdrawal through substance use or distracting activities. For example, someone is abusing you, instead of reacting to that, you just, stand up and go away from there. So that is like fleeing away from the situation. uh, or in other ways it can be seen as, you are depending on, like you are suffering from depression, so are you using alcohol, smoking, and other ways, other harmful ways to cope. Or you are just liking the isolation, so you are being alone all the time. So that will also come under flight. On the one hand, the fight or flight response is adaptive because it enables the organism to respond quickly to threat. On the other hand, it can be harmful because stress disrupts emotional and physiological functioning, and when stress continues unabated, it lays the groundwork for health problems. Okay, although like fight or flight response is very adaptive because it basically prepares your body. Uh, to react as quickly as possible, but it can be harmful because stress usually disrupts our cognitive functioning, our emotional or physiological functioning. And when stress continues unabated, it basically, like leads to many health problems. Then let's see this. So what physiological changes happens, like because of sympathetic nervous system, pupils dilate, heart rate increases, muscle tense and may tremble, then respiration quickens, then perspiration begins. These are some of the physiological responses to stress. The Cannon theory states that the lower part of the brain, also called the thalamus, controls your experience of emotion. Okay, so what did Cannon and Bart say? That the thalamus is responsible for how you experience your emotions. It basically controls your emotions. At the same time, cortex, which is like the higher part of your brain, it controls the expression of emotion. Okay, so two parts are controlling your emotion, thalamus and cortex. It is believed that these two parts of the brain react simultaneously, so these two work together. And then this is also referred to as fight or flight response. So what does this theory say? That amygdala processes what you see and hear, translating possible danger to hypothalamus. Okay, so like amygdala processes whatever information your environment is giving you, like whatever you see or whatever you hear. Then amygdala process that information and then identifies if it is threatening or challenging, and then finally it sends that message to hypothalamus. Amygdala sends messages to hypothalamus if the situation is threatening or not. Amygdala processes emotions. Then what happens, that amygdala will process emotions. Um, when it communicates potential danger, your brain has a stress response to stay and fight the danger or run away. Okay, so when finally amygdala perceives a situation as threatening, then your brain has a stress response, which can be either to fight the situation or run away from the situation. Once your amygdala initiates a distress signal, so whenever your amygdala identifies a situation as a stressful, your hypothalamus alerts your sympathetic nervous system by sending signals to your adrenal gland. Okay, so what happens? Hypothalamus acts on the adrenal gland, and adrenal gland will act on sympathetic nervous system. Okay, so hypothalamus, I am here, it is denoting it with HT. Okay, hypothalamus reacts on adrenal glands. The hypothalamus will send signal to adrenal glands, then adrenal gland will release hormones, right? Adrenal gland will release few hormones, and those hormones will act on sympathetic nervous system. Adrenaline begins pumping through your veins, quickly resulting in faster heartbeat, higher pulse rate, increased blood pressure, and faster breathing. Okay, adrenaline will be released from adrenal glands only. Okay, so I hope this part is clear. Then let's move on. Each of these physiological responses happens very quickly, and you won't even get aware of it at first. These things will happen automatically. Hundreds of years ago, our instincts kept us safe. Today, we face fewer real dangers, yet our flight or flight response may still be triggered by something. Okay, so this theory was given at the time when humans had a great threat from animals. At that time, it was like very logical explanation, but now though these situations are very less, but it's still fight or flight response is something which our body experiences till date. What is the example of Cannon theory? In today's world, fight or flight response may come in less dangerous situations. For example, your boss at work asks you to come into their office. You immediately think something is wrong and it triggers your glands to release adrenaline. You become defensive and may feel the need to walk into the office with your guard up, ready to fight. Okay, then according to Cannon, the fight or flight response, it is like a built-in mechanism which is there to help you maintain homeostasis, like an internal environment in which physiological variables such as blood pressure, respiration, digestion are stabilized at levels optimal for survival. Thus, Cannon viewed fight or flight response as adaptive because it enables people to adjust internally and externally to threats in their environment, allowing them to continue to be alive and become the threat. Okay. So I hope this is clear to you. This Cannon Bart theory is clear to you. I haven't mentioned strengths and limitations here, but it's like very much similar to Hans Selye's model of general adaptation syndrome. So it can be due to like one of the limitation I can think of is that again it ignores the cognitive aspect of stress, that everyone is different, so individual differences is ignored in this theory. So that is there, although it is like it gives a biological basis for stress, that is like a plus point. So I hope this theory is clear to you now, and I hope all the theories are clear, stress is clear. And that is it for today's video. If you have any doubt, please do ask in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching the video. I will see you all in the next video.